We shall see. Well, let's talk to Conservative MP Richard Fuller about this. Good morning to you, Richard.
Morning, Julia.
It is an interesting time in politics and for this Prime Minister when you've got a situation where it's almost welcome that everyone started talking about Ofgem and massive hikes in the energy prices, which was a nice diversion from talking about the chaos and the dysfunction and, frankly, immorality of what was going on at the top of number 10 during lockdown. When a Prime Minister is in a situation where that is a good news story for the government, things have gone horribly wrong. Do you think the Prime Minister is going to survive this?
Julia, you used that phrase "interesting times," which, of course, for Chinese culture is is not very good at all. And I think your political correspondent put his finger on a couple of things. I think, first of all, it's absolutely right that the public are not through these issues of Partygate, nor are the processes through. So we have to continue to listen and understand what's going on in that area. And secondly, that this change, which I think for small c Conservative-minded voters who want to see the manifesto commitments implemented, these appointments will be welcome, but they are not yet enough.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Again, is this going to be the big change that's going to, everyone's going to be a grown-up and they're not all going to be, frankly, wheeling a suitcase full of booze down Whitehall? Maybe that is the case, but it's probably about more than that anyway. We talked to Opinium's Chris Curtis a little bit earlier on the show, and he was talking about how once the polls, plummeted for not just the Conservative Party, but Boris Johnson personally over the Partygate revelations, they've kind of stuck down there. They have not gone up. Labour have gone up in the polls. Conservatives can stay down. We've not seen, even when we move on to other topics, we've not seen them come up again. And isn't part of the problem there is that all of the other topics are pretty negative for the government as well, whether it is energy price rises, whether it is national insurance, whether it is National Health Service backlogs, even the education story today, chaos over exams and more grade inflation. None of this goes down well with any voters, but particularly not with Conservative voters.
Well, they always say that news never publishes good stories or happy stories or bad stories. And I think that's what that very challenging list you put out is quite routine for governments. And that's the challenge for this government. This government has to win back those voters' support by making progress on those issues. It's essential that we get the Borders Bill through. It is essential that we move our agenda on net zero away from dogma, putting all the costs on consumers, towards a more pragmatic approach. And it's
a pragmatic approach would mean dropping net zero, wouldn't it?
Actually, no. We've done some work on the Select Committee on Business. There are ways that we can. I look at it sort of as a business perspective, Julia, which is net zero. People's desire has created a market, and there are companies out there that have certain products. In some areas, like automobiles, people like them. People are going to buy them. In other areas, like home heating and heat pumps, they're miles away. What we shouldn't be doing as a government is putting all the costs of innovation to achieve net zero onto the consumers. We should be saying to investors, you've got to create the products, and if you do, we will follow you. But we're not going to challenge consumers by putting up their bills artificially.
Well, but again, the Prime Minister's doubled down on that issue, even last week, even when we saw the Ofgem, the energy regulator, put up that cap. I mean, about even more than we were expecting for energy prices for domestic use, not by the way for business use. So many businesses are really, really struggling right now. I fail to see, other than the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and that's about the Queen, not Prince Boris, not Boris Johnson. There is not a single good news story around for the government right now, is there? Can you name one?
Well, a good challenge, Julia, of what I can think of about what's good for what the government is doing. I do think the government's doing certain things. Now, I'll come back to the Borders Bill that Priti Patel has been putting through. Now, I'm fairly liberal on immigration. I didn't vote for Mrs. May's last immigration bill. But what I like about what Priti Patel is doing is she's done a root and branch reform. I'm having letters in about people saying about all these criminal gangs taking boats across the channel. What this bill will do is it is a radically new approach to try and tackle that issue. So I think there are good news stories coming through.
Well, so you've got the bill that's going in, but at the end of the day, we have seen, in January, 6 times as many migrants came across on boats across the channel as January 2021. I mean, we're looking at, tens of thousands of illegal migrants to this country who cost £40,000 each in the first year just to deal with and process and house. I mean, the British public is up in arms about this, and quite understandably.
Quite understandably. And this is the pressure on the government. elected in December 2019. I came back because I wanted our country to achieve what I call escape velocity from the European Union. That meant clear direction and fast momentum to achieve it. We have lost 2 years in that for good reasons to deal with COVID.
Yeah.
And now we've got to make those goals happen in the next 2 years or we won't be re-elected.
And is Boris Johnson the man who's able to do that when effectively he's not got, one arm tied behind his back. He has tied both of his hands behind his back himself.
Well, I think he is in terms of his strategy and where we want to go. I put on one side the issues to do with the gatherings at number. They have a process to go. But absolutely, because he sets bold visions. But what he needs, and you mentioned Steve Barclay a little early on coming. I'm very pleased as a conservative-minded person to have Steve Barclay there for very dull reasons, I may say. He is a very sensible person. He's very rigorous in his thinking, and he's very conservative fiscally. And if he can bring some direction and order, because a lot of strategy is about dropping things that aren't right in front and centre of what you said to the electorate. So let's give Steve the chance to bring that order. Let's give the Prime Minister a chance to make some more changes. And let's get acting on those things that both elected.
Although let's say the Cabinet Office job was a full-time job, being an MP a full-time job, combining those two as government ministers have to do, and then adding in Chief of Staff, it's quite a lot of work. Let's talk about the very much the sort of, elephant in the corner of the room all the time. It's Carrie Johnson, nicknamed Carrie Antoinette. Lots of claims, and we saw in Michael Ashcroft, the former Tory Treasurer, his book serialised in Sunday papers this weekend, these claims that actually, the power behind the throne is Carrie Johnson, that she and her friends who many of them been political advisors in Number 10, all for Michael Gove, tending to move between the two. She is directing everything. She's behind whether or not it's dogs and cats on planes coming out of Kabul instead of human beings, whether or not we're in favour of net zero and going for COP26, and that she is driving an awful lot of this. Is it reasonable that Carrie Johnson should be blamed for any or all of what's gone wrong?
Well, I've never met Carrie Johnson, but I think, if anyone who reads novels goes to a bookshelf and picks any historical novel, there's a pretty good chance they'll find something in there which is a novel and story of getting at the spouse of someone powerful. And it, to me, seems really rather cowardly that people go after the spouse, someone who doesn't have a direct role in politics, and makes up a view that somehow they have this magic influence over a particular leader. We've seen it time and time and time again in history. It's always played up far beyond anything that's real. And I think it's very unfair to her.
You're saying that her influence will be the same as any political spouse, whether it's Cherie Blair or Philip May, and it's just, of course, prime ministers, whoever they are, will seek the advice of their partner. I mean, she was director of communications of the Conservative Party. She is best mates with some of the most senior advisors, as were last week in Number 10. We know that the battles between her and Dominic Cummings were one of the reasons why Dominic Cummings was ousted. Well, one of the main reasons, if not the reason. I think it's unfair to say that she has no influence. But if she does have influence, is it the Prime Minister to blame for that? Precisely,
Julia. That's exactly right. People should direct their concerns to the person who makes the decisions. In this case, that's the Prime Minister. I think it's rather cowardly to go after someone's spouse rather than to confront the decision maker directly.
Do you think this issue needs to be addressed by the Prime Minister? Does he need to, does he need to make a statement, whether to her or the staff, that she does not have that influence anymore? Does he need to start thinking for himself? Part of the issue, surely, is that, he doesn't have any policies when he believes himself, and therefore the last person who spoke to him gets to have the say, and often that is his wife.
I won't go down that path, Julie, but I certainly don't want to advise a husband to tell his wife what he should or what they should do.
Brave.
I wouldn't deign to do that for you, Julie. I'm not sure how your family arrangements work, but I know sometimes you talk about your husband on the show, and it's always nice to hear those things, and you're quite open about it.
My long-suffering husband. Richard, really good to talk to you. Richard Fuller, Conservative MP. Thank you very much indeed.